Right now, I have the opportunity to speak with someone who has 27 years of Microsoft project experience. And I'm really excited to have this conversation with you, Dale. And
Thank you.
I think that it would be best if you kind of just give an introduction of who you are and kind of your background working with Microsoft Project through the years.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Dale Howard. Next month will be my 27th anniversary of using Microsoft Project for the very first time. For the first 3 years I was using it, I was teaching people how to use it just occasionally, and I always thought I would go back to my first love, which was training and consulting on Microsoft Excel. But what I didn't realize was that Microsoft Project would become my career, my life and livelihood, let's say, for the last 27 years. Along the way, Kenny, a couple really nice things have happened to me. One of them is that I was given the opportunity to author or co-author 23 different books on Microsoft Project, Project Server, and Project Online. The cool thing was I didn't have to do that evenings and weekends. It was part of my regular job. So 8 to 5, I'm writing books. And then the other thing is 21 years ago, Microsoft honored me by naming me a Project MVP, or Most Valuable Professional. I've held that title now for 21 years, just got renewed for another year this last month. And currently there's only 11 of us in the entire world and only 3 of us here in the United States. So it's a small, very select group of Project MVPs. So that's a little bit about me.
So I think it's safe to say that you are probably one of the most knowledgeable people on Microsoft Project in the whole world.
That's probably safe to say, but you can learn something new every day. I actually learned something new yesterday to answer a user's question in one of the public user forums. So we're never so experienced that we can't learn something new about the software.
Absolutely. So I wanted to take this opportunity that I have with you to kind of talk about the feature that's in Microsoft Project that allows people to create master projects from subprojects. And specifically, I want to talk about linked subprojects, or subprojects that are connected to their source files within the master project. And in my experience, I see a lot of issues with this, and I generally advise people against using this feature. But I thought maybe you could shed some light on exactly what happens when someone uses this feature in Microsoft Project, maybe how the technology works. Just shed any kind of light on this that you can.
Sure. Well, when you create a master project that you described as a linked master project, where each subproject is linked to its native or host, project, and you insert the subprojects as read-write, let me just say first off, it's a great thing, because if you need to manage a program of projects, for example, it lets you put them all into Microsoft Project at the same time to be able to see them all on the screen, simultaneously. But it does come with some built-in problems. The number one problem that I have noticed, and this is a big user complaint, is when I create the master project, I've got it open, the inserted projects are read-write, I've now locked out the project managers of each sub-project because I've got them checked out. And this is true whether we're using desktop only projects or we're using enterprise projects in either Project Online or Project Server. By having the master project open, the sub projects are also opened as well and basically checked out. A second problem that I've also noticed, and I saw this at a company that was a former client that was later my own employer, and that is if you have a very large master project where you've got sub projects with thousands of tasks and potentially dozens or hundreds of resources, the process of opening the master is really, really slow, especially in a project server or project online environment. The largest master project that I saw at my former employer included one project that had 7,700 tasks in it with up to 200 resources assigned to tasks in the project. At a former client, I've seen projects that had sub-projects that had 15,000 tasks in them, and then you add it into a master where there's 7,000 tasks in one project and 12,000 in another, and I can't even tell you how long it takes to open that master project. So, and then the third issue, Kenny, this is really good that we just expose some of the raw, pain and wounds that we might get by using a master project. Is you can save the master project in OneDrive or in SharePoint. And by the way, OneDrive is actually saving things in SharePoint. You can do it there. But then our next topic which is setting cross-project dependencies. You can't do that in a master project saved on OneDrive or SharePoint. So using a master project, as you already know, comes with some overhead and some potential problems.
So one of the things I want to just clarify that you touched on there that I think is interesting that a lot of people don't actually realize is that if you open a master project that has sub-project files, you're actually also opening those sub-project files at
Correct.
the same time, because they're like, in essence, you're kind of just viewing another file, but within a larger Microsoft project file. But all the data that's there is not actually part of that file. It's part of a different file. There's this connection that has to happen between the two, which definitely will slow down the performance.
What you're describing there, Kenny, is the master project is like the container that holds each of the sub-projects, which are the real projects. So you open the master, you open the container, and you're getting those real projects that are the sub-projects opened as well.
I think that's so important for people to understand, because a lot of people who I've worked with in the past will talk about how things take so much longer to run, any tools that they have, or just regular standard Microsoft project things. They change a duration of a task, and it just takes a long time to actually process that. And that's because, like you said, we're just looking at a container that is referencing another source file. So to make that change, it has to ping that data to the actual source file, which then might ping data to other source files if they're connected.
Yeah, and and that's one thing I hadn't even thought of, Kenny, but there's the waterfall effect that in a large project or large master project, it's advisable to turn off automatic calculation in Microsoft Project for that file and those sub-project files, because just making a change takes too long for the change to the schedule to waterfall or cascade through each of the sub-projects. And it's better to do it all at once, maybe at the end of the session. So these are certainly the prices we pay for using a master project.
Got it. And of course, those issues will be more pronounced the larger the sub-project files are.
Correct.
Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is the main thing that a lot of people use the linked subprojects for is to create cross-project dependencies. So a task in one project that goes to a task in a separate project. Can you tell us a little bit about those and perhaps some of the issues with them and how they work exactly?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question. If you want to set cross-project dependencies to show a task dependency relationship between one project and another project, you would have to start with a master project. So therein is the first problem. We've talked about the problems with master projects, and now we're saying, well, if you want to do this, you have to use a master project. So there's the first problem. The second problem is the technology behind setting cross-project dependencies is actually very, very old. I was conferring with a colleague this morning who's a former Microsoft Project MVP, and we were both laughing about these old technologies. There's a feature in Microsoft Project called copy and paste link, which is also in Excel, by the way.
Yeah.
That technology is so ancient. It was called DDE, Dynamic Data Exchange, and that's a very fragile, old technology, very unstable. Okay, so that was the first generation. And then to be able to set cross-project dependencies, you get a brand new, improved version of DDE, which is called OLE, Object Linking and Editing, but that's also very fragile, and it's also a very, very old technology, which means, in the process of trying to create cross-project dependencies, you're setting yourself up for all kinds of potential problems, one of which is ultimately a corrupted master project where some or all of the subprojects are corrupted. Also, it creates limitations on what you can do with your individual projects that are sub-projects. You never, never, ever want to open a sub-project and do file save as, for example, because now you've got a duplicate project with duplicate cross-project dependencies. So, you're dealing with these old technologies that require a very, very rigid approach to creating them. And even if you follow the rules that I'm espousing today, the projects can still get corrupted. So go figure.
Yeah. And so just from my research in OLE, it was created back in like 1990. So we're not even talking Windows 95
right
at that point.
Yeah.
That's also an important point because a lot of the stuff that we do today modernly on a computer, like with our file system and with networks and with all these things, was not even a conceivable at the time when they created this technology.
That's right.
And so it's almost like we, in order for us to still work well with those, we have to ignore a lot of the modern conveniences that a computer allows us to do, which that's a sacrifice that's kind of difficult to make, just having all the projects on the local machine, never putting them anywhere else, especially when you have a team of people who need to be able to access these project files.
Yep. Ain't it the truth? And then let me piggyback on what you just said. And this is one of the things that, as a consultant and trainer, teaching people how to do things, my former client who became my employer at one point, we were using the Project Online system, and we had this giant master project that included that 7,700 task, sub-project in it, and they wanted to create cross-project dependencies. Now, I told them, listen, err on the low end, put in only the bare bones minimum number of cross-project dependencies that you absolutely need and cannot do without. And so instead of heeding my sage advice, they went for the high end. And they discovered, oh no, this slowed things way down. And then when people would open each of the sub-projects individually, now they're getting dialogue after dialogue after dialogue to update the links in the project. That was driving people crazy. So it ended up, the history of this was, Dale says, err on the low end. They erred on the high end. Later, they got so frustrated, they brought it back down to the low end. And then they still got so frustrated, they gave up on it entirely and took out all of the cross-project links and figured out how to use external milestones from one project to another, where you just update the milestone manually based on an update that a fellow project manager gave you verbally or in an email message, and so forth. They just handled it that way. The cross-project dependencies just drove them crazy. Insanity is a potential risk, Kenny, of using cross-project dependencies.
So a couple things that you said in there that I want to touch on. So the more cross-project dependencies that you create, the more unstable the project file becomes. And also, it sounded like that's going to have performance impacts like we talked about before, where the more cross-project dependencies you have, the slower things are going to go in project. And that's not just in the master project, but also the sub-project files as well.
Yes, absolutely right. And and one of the issues that drove these project managers crazy is a dialogue called the links between projects dialogue, which every time you have a driving task in one sub-project whose schedule changes, and then that will change one or more tasks in a successor project, you get the links between projects dialog, which tells you all of the changes in the driving project. And then you got to figure out, how is this going to impact the successor project? And it was just driving people crazy. I'm telling you, I can't emphasize how frustrating that was for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've definitely seen similar things. So you also brought up your own personal experience there working with a customer. And like you said at the beginning, you have been using Microsoft Project for 27 years. So I imagine you've seen a lot of people who have tried this method. And can you just tell me, have you ever seen a very smooth process for anyone who's used it?
No, not really. Ultimately, they'll follow the path I just described with my former employer, going on the high side, then bringing down to the low side, and then finally giving up. I was going to tell you, in the realm of clients, about a month ago, I was meeting with a client looking at a master project where this master project was totally misbehaving, where features in Microsoft Project that are supposed to work one way were working the exact opposite way. And as I studied this with the client, more and more it became apparent that because of a preponderance of cross-project dependencies, that ultimately one or more of the sub-projects had become corrupted. And a corrupted project is a project that doesn't behave right, that doesn't work right anymore. And that probably is the greatest danger of all. So for that particular client, it's time to scrub the cross-project dependencies out of that master project, save each of the sub-projects as an XML file, to try to restore the functionality, and then find some other method, for handling the cross-project dependency relationship. So, yeah, I saw it was a badly corrupted master project, let's just say.
Yeah, I've seen corruption issues happen just with projects that don't use this kind of environment. So I definitely know that working in this increases the likelihood of the project files becoming corrupted, especially across time.
Definitely.
So that's one of the things that I really want to warn people about, is even if you are very, very diligent with how you handle it, just a mistake that someone makes that they may not catch across time could cause ripple effects, and there could be other mistakes that get made, and then eventually the project files just don't work the way that they're supposed to work.
Yep, that's true. And the master project is dead on arrival.
So I have just maybe two more things that I wanted to get your thoughts on. So
sure.
A lot of times when I am talking with people about this method, they will believe that these issues will not apply if they're working with project server or project online. So if they're building a master project, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, that still there's performance issues and all these things. But can you tell me, are any of these issues alleviated at all? Any of the things that we've talked about so far, if you're working in a project server or project online environment?
Yeah, none of the issues are alleviated by using an enterprise tool. If anything, they're magnified. And the consequences of a corrupted enterprise project are actually worse than a corrupted desktop project. My former employer was working in a project server environment. And, basically that's where they saw this tremendous slowdown in opening the master project, each of the sub projects, et cetera, et cetera. So no, there's no salvation, let's just say, in going to Microsoft's enterprise tools, project online or project server.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you. And then one more thing. You mentioned kind of this process that the client that you were working with in the past kind of went to, where they basically just identified their handoff points and maybe marked those in the schedule, but didn't create the actual OLE cross-project dependency. And they would just synchronize the dates with how they would be if everything was actually synchronized up in the master project, or they were doing an email system. Is that would you say that that's your recommendation for working in this kind of environment? Is there any circumstance that you'd say that doing a linked master project would be better than that alternative?
No, I think my advice would be to steer clear of a linked master project with cross-project dependencies. I think just a better approach would be, one, external milestones that represent a handoff from one project to another that are updated manually by the project manager on the receiving end. An even better solution would be if somebody created a software tool where we could list. Now, this sounds like a shameless plug, Kenny, for what you folks offer, but the truth is it would be nice if there was a software tool that would do this to remove the manual updating need between the project managers.
I absolutely agree. And I think that some of the stuff that our tools can do can absolutely help people in that department. Hopefully this conversation can help people see how that might, even though it does require a little bit more upfront work, how that might be a better alternative.
Sure. Yep. I'd agree with that.
Okay. Well, I think that's all the questions that I had about that, Dale. So I want to thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. It's always exciting when I can talk with an expert and just geek out about something that I love, which is Microsoft Project. There's not many of us in the world who can just geek out about this kind of stuff. So really appreciate it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you having me on, and thanks for letting me spout off on this particular subject.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Talk to you soon, Dale.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Hey, thanks so much for watching our YouTube video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit that like button, and if you want to see more from our channel, hit subscribe and that notification bell. If you want to learn more about structured solutions, you can visit us online at ssitools.com. We look forward to seeing you there.